Welcome, Wapham crew, new listeners, friends, fiends, family, and phantoms. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, November 6th. Monday, November 7th, for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. We are broadcasting live from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and I hope you guys have had an awesome, relaxing weekend so far. Thank you so much for joining us on one of our many outlets. If you're listening to us live right now, you may be listening to us under We Are Paradox Media at Spreaker.com. That's also where our chat is if you'd like to come in and say hello. You may also be listening to us live on KPNL Radio, which you can find on KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. We're also on eTalk Radio, which you can find at etalk.tv/radio. If you'd like to listen to us in your free time, whether you're working it, or working out, please look us up once more under We Are Paradox Media at Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Tumblr, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podcast Chaser, as well as Podvine. If you'd like to mosey on over to YouTube, if you're more comfortable in that area, you can find most of our episodes on there. A lot of them aren't on there because we were grounded for a bit, but we're back on YouTube under We Are Paradox Media. Please subscribe, like any video that you've listened to, and make sure you give that bell a little tickle so next time we have a show come out, you'll be made aware of it. It'll pop up on your feed. It'll say, hey, guess what? We Are Paradox Media just posted a new show. You might want to come listen to it. So last night we had Mr. Patrick Cross in. We also had Boo on for a second. A good time is always had when Pat is on. That is one of our number one rules on this show. The only rule I have is have a good time. Otherwise, it's an adult show. Feel free to speak freely. Talk about certain things you're not allowed to talk to on other shows or talk about on other shows. It's a pretty free-flowing place. I like to just fly by the seat of my pants, and you can probably tell that a lot of times. I hope it's not an issue. Sometimes I'm just like, come on, get it together, woman. So, if you didn't know, or you forgot, tonight, aka Sunday morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I wonder if that's across the board, 2 a.m. across the board in the United States, or is it 2 a.m. at one certain location across the United States? It could be just here in Colorado, but it's time to fall back in time. That means we get an extra hour of sleep. I really honestly wish they'd just leave it alone and not do it anymore. I was always under the impression that time change was for farmers, so they had a little extra time in their day to get out there in the fields and do whatnot. Although harvest season is October 31st, not sure what they're going to be doing about this time of year unless it's kind of preparing the ground, digging stuff up, putting it underground so it can decompose and put those nice little nutrients into the earth. But then a lady on the news the other day, and this was actually the Denver news, she said it was due to trying to save on electricity, which, okay, 1 hour is really going to help with that. I just don't see how that could even be close to the truth. And then my husband said, oh no, that's BS. It's not because of the farmers. It's not because of saving on electricity. It's because of World War I and the homing pigeons. And homing pigeons are really into magnetic poles, times a day, etc., etc. So for the homing pigeons, they did time change. Which one of these is true? Please let me know what you think in the comments here on We Are Paradox Media at Spreaker, or send me a message on my email, which is weareparadoxmedia@gmail.com, or look me up on Facebook under We Are Paradox Media or Tessa Nicole Thomas Peterson, and just send me a message. What do you think? What is time change really all about? And why is it that the House and Senate are having such an issue getting rid of it? Arizona doesn't use it, and in a lot of ways they seem a lot happier, but in other ways not quite. I could not live in Phoenix. I go there to visit, and that's about it. I even shoveled tons of dirt into an old pond there in Phoenix. It was crazy. I was so grateful when the handle on that wheelbarrow broke. I was like, "Ugh, I'm done. Now I can snap into you for the next 3 days and then try to get my form back." Shoveling, wheeling, dumping, leveling. Oh my goodness, that was so much work in the hot Phoenix sun. It was insane. We did a lot of our work at night too, but you can't do too much because of neighbors. So, anywho's, this coming weekend, I have a treat for you guys. We have Midnight Paranormal Society. These guys are out of San Antonio, Texas. They're really awesome. We might just have, I believe it's Mike on. I might want to double check that. But Mike, who is the founder of this group, yeah, I definitely want to double check. Yes, Mike Cardenas is the founder of the group, and he's going to be on this next weekend. Maybe we'll get another member of the group in, but he's a pretty awesome guy. He just got one of his boosters and got really, really sick and wasn't expecting that. If we don't book anybody by Sunday, I really do like doing story time on Sundays. I like doing them at least once every weekend. Sometimes it's willy-nilly. December is looking epic. We're booked up. We're going to have very few story times. The only one I have booked so far for story time is Christmas, and we only have 3 other dates available in December. The forum this month is going to be on my birthday. It's going to be an excellent gathering of friends. I hope we have a really good time with that. If you're a group or paranormal enthusiast that listens to the show, we still have the 13th and 20th that I'm willing to open up for November. Otherwise, that's story time. But I'm willing to give up my story time show for people in the paranormal or groups. But at the same time, I do enjoy story time. So this evening on story time, we are going to be reading once again from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and then Reddit ghost stories. If you'd like to call in with your ghost story, feel free to. I do have the Skype up and running. Just give us a call at 970-335-9596. That's 970-335-9596. Yeah, it's really actually doesn't feel too bad. Maybe it's just the fuzzy pajamas. So it says it's 48.9 degrees outside, and it is 53.6 degrees inside. But yeah, I think these minion fuzzy pajamas are really doing their job. For those of you across the pond, it's 9.3 degrees outside and 12.1 degrees Celsius inside. Another place where we're split as far as things go. Centimeters, inches, metrics. What the heck is going on in the world? I do not know. So let's go on over and see where we're at in this book. I do believe we're actually at. I'm so bad at my Roman numerals. Okay. Chapter 16. Cursed, cursed Creator, why did I live? Why in that instant did I not extinguish the spark of existence which you had so wantonly bestowed? I know not. Despair had not yet taken possession of me. My feelings were those of rage and revenge. I could with pleasure have destroyed the cottage and its inhabitants, and have glutted myself with their shrieks and misery. When night came, I quieted my retreat and wandered in the wood, and now, no longer restrained by the fear of discovery, I gave vent to my anguish in fearful howlings. I was like a wild beast that had broken the toils, destroying the objects that obstructed me, and ranging through the wood with a stag-like swiftness. Oh, what a miserable night I passed! The cold stars shone in mockery, and the bare trees waved their branches above me. Now and then the sweet voice of a bird burst through amidst the universal stillness. All, save I, were at rest or in enjoyment. I, like the arch fiend, bore hell within me, and finding myself unsympathized with, wished to tear up the trees, spread havoc and destruction around me, and then to have sat down and enjoyed the ruin. But this was a luxury of sensation that could not endure. I became fatigued with excess of bodily exertion, and sank on the damp grass in the sick impotence of despair. There was none among the myriads of men that existed who would pity or assist me, and should I feel kindness towards my enemies? No. From that moment I declared everlasting war against the species, and, more than all, against him who had formed me, and sent me forth to this unsupportable misery. The sun rose, I heard the voices of men, and knew that it was impossible to return to my retreat during the day. Accordingly, I hid myself in some thick underwood, determining to devote the ensuing hours to reflection on my situation. The pleasant sunshine and the pure air of the day restored me to some degree of tranquillity, and when I considered what had passed at the cottage, I could not help believing that I had been too hasty in my conclusions. I had certainly acted imprudently. It was apparent that my conversation had interested the father in my behalf, and I was a fool in having exposed my person to the horror of his children. I ought to have familiarized the old De Lacy to me, and by degrees to have discovered myself to the rest of his family, when they should have been prepared for my approach. But I did not believe my errors to be irretrievable, and after much consideration I resolved to return to the cottage, seek the old man, and by my representations win him to my party. These thoughts calmed me, and in the afternoon I sank into a profound sleep. But the fever of my blood did not allow me to be visited by peaceful dreams. The horrible scene of the preceding day was forever acting before my eyes. The females were flying, and the enraged Felix tearing me from his father's feet. I awoke exhausted, and finding that it was already night, I crept forth from my hiding place and went in search of food. When my hunger was appeased, I directed my steps towards the well-known path that conducted to the cottage. All there was, at peace. I crept in my hovel, and remained in silent expectation of the accustomed hour when the family arose. The hour passed, the sun mounted high in the heavens, but the cottagers did not appear. I trembled violently, apprehending some dreadful misfortune. The inside of the cottage was dark, and I heard no motion. I cannot describe the agony of this suspense. Presently, two countrymen passed by. Pausing near the cottage, they entered into conversation, using violent gesticulations, but I did not understand what they say, as they spoke the language of the country, which differed from that of my protectors. Soon after, however, Felix approached with another man. I was surprised, as I knew that he had not quitted the cottage that morning, and waited anxiously to discover from his discourse the meanings of these unusual appearances. "Do you consider," he said to his companion, or said his companion to him, "that you will be obliged to pay 3 months' rent to lose the produce of your garden, I do not wish to take away any unfair advantage, and I beg, therefore, that you will take some days to consider of your determination." "It is utterly useless," replied Felix. "We can never again inhabit your cottage. The life of my father is in the greatest danger, owing it to the dreadful circumstances that I have related. My wife and my sister will never recover from their horror. I entreat you not to reason with me any more. Take possession of your tenement, and let me fly from this place." Felix trembled violently as he said this. He and his companion entered the cottage, in which they remained for a few minutes, and then departed. I never saw any of the family of De Lacy any more. I continued for the remainder of the day in my hovel in a state of utter and stupid despair. My protectors had departed, and had broken the only link that held me to the world. For the first time the feelings of revenge and hatred filled my bosom, and I did not strive to control them, but allowing myself to be borne away by the stream, I bent my mind towards injury and death. When I thought of my friends, of the mild voice of De Lacy, the gentle eyes of Agatha, and the exquisite beauty of the Arabian, these thoughts vanished, and a gush of tears somewhat soothed me. But again, when I reflected that they had spurned and deserted me, anger returned, a rage of anger, and, unable to injure anything human, I turned my fury towards inanimate objects. As night advanced, I placed a variety of combustibles around the cottage, and, after having destroyed every vestige of cultivation in the garden, I waited with forced impatience until the moon had sunk to commence my operations. As the night advanced, a fierce wind arose from the woods and quickly dispersed the clouds that had loitered in the heavens. The blast tore along like a mighty avalanche and produced a kind of insanity in my spirits that burst all bounds of reason and reflection. I lighted the dry branch of a tree and danced with fury around the devoted cottage, my eyes still fixed on the western horizon, the edge of which the moon nearly touched. A part of its orb was at length hid, and I waved my brand. It sank, and with a loud scream I fired the straw, and heath and bushes which I had collected. The wind fanned the fire, and the cottage was quickly enveloped by flames, which clung to it, and licked it with their forked and destroying tongues. As soon as I was convinced that no assistance could save any part of the habitation, I quitted the scene, and sought for refuge in the woods. And now, with the world before me, whither should I bend my steps? I resolved to fly far from the scene of my misfortunes. But to me, hated and despised, every country must be equally horrible. At length the thought of you crossed my mind. I learned from your papers that you were my father, my creator, and to whom I could apply with more fitness than to him who had given me life. Among the lessons that Felix had bestowed upon Safie, geography had not been omitted. I had learned from these the relative situations of the different countries of the earth. You had mentioned Geneva as the name of your native town, and towards this place I resolved to proceed. But how was I to direct myself? I knew that I must travel in a southwesterly direction to reach my destination, but the sun was my only guide. I did not know the names of the towns that was to pass through, nor could I ask information from a single human being. But I did not despair, for you only could I hope for secure, although towards you I felt no sentiment but that of hatred. Unfeeling, heartless creator! You had endowed me with the perceptions and passions, and then cast me abroad, an object for the scorn and horror of mankind. But on you only had I any claim for pity and redress, and from you I determined to seek that justice which I vainly attempted to gain from any other being that wore the human form. My travels were long, and the sufferings I endured intense. It was late in autumn when I quitted the district when I had so long resided. I travelled only at night, fearful of encountering the visage of a human being. Nature decayed around me, and the sun became heatless. Rain and snow poured around me. Mighty rivers were frozen. The surface of the earth was hard and chill and bare. Mighty rivers were frozen, and I found no shelter. O earth, how often did I imprecate curses on the cause of my being! The mildness of my nature had fled, and all within me was turned to gall and bitterness. Did I feel the spirit of revenge enkindled in my heart? Snow fell and the waters were hardened, but I rested not. A few incidents now and then directed me, and I possessed a map of the country. But I often wandered wide from my path. The agony of my feelings allowed me no respite. No incident occurred from which my rage and misery could not extract its food. But a circumstance that happened when I arrived on the confines of Switzerland, when the sun had recovered its warmth and the earth began again to look green, confirmed in an especial manner the bitterness and horror of my feelings. I generally rested during the day, and travelled only when I was secured by night from the view of man. One morning, however, finding that my path lay through a deep wood, I ventured to continue my journey after the sun had risen. The day, which was one of the first of spring, cheered even me by the loveliness of its sunshine and the balminess of the air. I felt emotions of gentleness and pleasure, that had long appeared dead, revive within me. Half surprised by the novelty of these sensations, I allowed myself to be borne away by them, and, forgetting my solitude and deformity, dared to be happy. Soft tears again bedewed my cheeks, and I even raised my human eyes with thankfulness towards the blessed sun which had bestowed such joy upon me. I continued to wind among the paths of wood, until I came to its boundary, which was skirted by a deep and rapid river, and to which many of the trees bent, knowing what path to pursue. When I heard the sound of voices that induced me to conceal myself under the shade of a cypress, I was scarcely hid when a young girl came running towards the spot where I was concealed, laughing as if she ran from someone in sport. She continued her course along the precipitous sides of the river, when suddenly her foot slipped, and she fell into the rapid stream. I rushed from my hiding place, and, with extreme labor from the force of the current, saved her, and dragged her to shore. She was senseless, and I endeavored, by my own means in my power, to restore animation, when I was suddenly interrupted by the approach of a rustic, who was probably the person from whom she had playfully fed. On seeing me, he darted towards me, and tearing the girl from my arms, hastened towards the deeper parts of the woods. I followed speedily, I hardly knew why, but when the man saw me draw near, he aimed a gun, which he carried, at my body, and fired. I sank to the ground, and my injurer, with increased swiftness, escaped into the wood. This was then the reward of my benevolence? I had saved a human being from destruction, and as a recompense I now writhed under the miserable pain of a wound which shattered the flesh and bone. The feelings of kindness and gentleness, which I had entertained but a few moments before, gave place to hellish rage and gnashing of teeth. Inflamed by pain, I vowed eternal hatred and vengeance to all mankind. But the agony of my wound overcame me. My pulses paused, and I fainted. For some weeks I led a miserable life in the woods, endeavoring to cure the wound which I had received. The ball had entered my shoulder, and I knew not whether it had remained there or passed through. At any rate, I had no means of extracting it. My sufferings were augmented also by the oppressive sense of the injustice and ingratitude of their infliction. My daily vow rose for revenge, a deep and deadly revenge, such as would alone compensate for the outrages and anguish I had endured. After some weeks, my wound healed, and I continued my journey. The labors I endured were no longer to be alleviated by the bright sun or gentle breezes of spring. All joy was but a mockery which insulted my desolate state, and made me feel more painfully that I was not made for the enjoyment of pleasure. But my toils now drew near a close, and in 2 months from this time I reached the environs of Geneva. It was evening when I arrived, and I retired to a hiding place among the fields that surround it. To meditate in what manner I should apply to you, I was oppressed by fatigue and hunger, and far too happy, far too unhappy, to enjoy the gentle breezes of evening, or the prospect of the sun setting behind the stupendous mountains of Jura. At this time a slight sleep relieved me from the pain of reflection, which was disturbed by the approach of the beautiful child, who came running into the recess I had chosen, in all the sportiveness of infancy. Suddenly, as I gazed on him, an idea seized me that this little creature was unprejudiced, and had lived too short a time to have invited a horror of deformity. If therefore I could seize him and educate him as my companion and friend, I should not be so desolate in this people earth. Urged by this impulse, I seized on the boy as he passed and drew him towards me. As soon as he beheld my form, he placed his hands before his eyes and uttered a shrill scream. I drew his hand forcibly from his face and said, "Child, what is the meaning of this? I do not intend to hurt you. Listen to me." He struggled violently. "Let me go!" he cried. "Monster, ugly wretch, you wish to eat me and tear me to pieces. You are an ogre. Let me go, or I will tell my papa." "Boy, you will never see your father again. You must come with me." "Hideous monster, let me go. My papa is a syndic. He is Frankenstein. He will punish you. You dare not keep me." "Frankenstein? You belong then to my enemy, to him towards whom I have sworn eternal revenge. You shall be my first victim." The child still struggled, and loaded me with epithets which carried despair to my heart. I grasped his throat to silence him, and in a moment he lay dead at my feet. I gazed on my victim, and my heart swelled with exultation and hellish triumph. Clapping my hands, I exclaimed, "I too can create desolation. My enemy is not invulnerable. This death will carry despair to him, and 1,000 other miseries shall torment and destroy him." As I fixed my eyes on the child, I saw something glittering on his breast. I took it. It was a portrait of a most lovely woman. In spite of my malignity, it softened and attracted me. For a few moments I gazed with delight on her dark eyes, fringed by deep lashes, and her lovely lips, but presently my rage returned. I remembered that I was forever deprived of the delights of such beautiful creatures could bestow, and that she whose resemblance to contemplated would, in regard me, have changed the air of divine benignity to one expressive of disgust and affright. Can you wonder that such thoughts transported me with rage? I only wonder that at that moment, instead of venting my sensations in exclamations and agony, I did not rush among mankind and perish in the attempt to destroy them. While I was overcome by these feelings, I left the spot where I had committed the murder, and seeking a more secluded hiding place, I entered a barn which had appeared to me to be empty. A woman was sleeping on some straw. She was young, not indeed so beautiful as her whose portrait I held, but of an agreeable aspect and blooming in the loveliness of youth and health. Here, I thought, is one of those whose joy and parting smiles are bestowed on all but me. And then I bent over her and whispered, "Awake, fairest, thy lover is near. He who would give his life but to obtain one look of affection from thine eyes, my beloved, awake." The sleeper stirred. A thrill of terror ran through me. Should she indeed awake and see me and curse me and denounce the murderer, thus would she assuredly act if her darkened eyes opened and she beheld me. The thought of madness has stirred and fiend within me. Not I, but she shall suffer. The murder I have committed because I am forever robbed of all that she could give me. She shall atone. The crime that had its source in her be hers the punishment. Thanks to the lessons of Felix and the sanguinary laws of man, I had learned how to work mischief. I bent over her and placed the portrait securely in one of the folds of her dress. She moved again, and I fled. For some days I haunted the spot where these scenes had taken place, sometimes wishing to see you, sometimes resolved to quit the world and its miseries forever. At length I wandered towards these mountains, and have ranged through their immense recesses, consumed by a burning passion which you alone can gratify. We may not part until you have promised to comply with my requisition. I am alone and miserable. Man will not associate with me, but one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create. Chapter 17. The being finished speaking, and fixed his looks upon me in the expectation of a reply. But I was bewildered, perplexed, and unable to arrange my ideas sufficiently to understand the full extent of his proposition. He continued, "You must create a female for me with whom I can live in the interchange of those sympathies necessary for my being. This you alone can do, and I demand it of you as a right which you must not refuse to concede." The latter part of this tale kindled anew in me the anger that had died away while he narrated his peaceful life among the cottagers, and as he said this, I could no longer suppress the rage that burned within me. "I do refuse it," I replied, "and no torture shall ever extort a consent from me. You may render me the most miserable of men, but you shall never make me base in my own eyes. Shall I create another like yourself, whose joint wickedness might desolate the world? Begone! I have answered you, and you may torture me, but I will never consent." "You are in the wrong," replied the fiend, "and instead of threatening, I am content to reason with you. I am malicious because I am miserable. I am not shunned and hated by all mankind. You, my creator, would tear me to pieces and triumph. Remember that, and tell me why I should pity man more than he pities me. You would not call it murder if you could precipitate me into one of those ice rifts and destroy my frame, the work of your own hands. Shall I respect man when he contemns me? Let him live with me in the interchange of kindness, and instead of injury I would bestow every benefit upon him with tears of gratitude of his acceptance. But that cannot be. The human senses of insurmountable barriers to our union, yet mine shall not be the submission of abject slavery. I will revenge my injuries if I cannot inspire love. I will cause fear, and chiefly towards you, my arch enemy, because my Creator, do I swear, inextinguishable hatred. Have a care. I will work at your destruction, nor finish until I desolate your heart, so that you shall curse the hour of your birth. A fiendish rage animated him as he said this. His face was wrinkled into contortions too horrible for human eyes to behold, but presently he calmed himself and proceeded. Intended to reason, this passion is detrimental to me, for you do not reflect that you are the cause of its excess. If any being felt emotions of benevolence towards me, I should return them an hundredfold. For that one creature's sake, I would make peace with the whole kind. But I now indulge in dreams of bliss that cannot be realized. What I ask of you is reasonable and moderate. I demand a creature of another sex, but as hideous as myself. The gratification is small, but it is all that I can receive, and it shall content me. It is true, we shall be monsters cut off from all the world, but on that account we shall be more attached to one another. Our lives will not be happy, but they will be harmless and free from the misery I now feel. Oh, my Creator, make me happy. Let me feel gratitude towards you for one benefit. Let me see that I excite the sympathy of some existing thing. Do not deny me my request. I was moved. I shuddered when I thought of the possible consequences of my consent, but I felt that there was some justice in his argument. His tale and the feelings he now expressed proved him to be a creature of fine sensations, and did I not, as his Maker, owe him all the portion of happiness that it was in my power to bestow? He saw my change of feeling and continued, "If you consent, neither you nor any other human being shall ever see us again. I will go to the vast wilds of South Africa. My food is not that of man. I do not destroy the lamb and the kid or the glute my appetite. Acorns and berries afford me sufficient nourishment. My companion will be the same nature as myself, and will be content with the same fare. We shall make our bed of dried leaves. The sun will shine on us as on man, and will ripen our food. The picture I present to you is peaceful and humane, and you must feel that you could deny it only in the wantonness of power and cruelty. Pitiless as you have been towards me, I now see compassion in your eyes. Let me seize the favourable moment and persuade you to promise what I so ardently desire." "You propose," replied I, "to fly from the habitations of man to dwell in those wilds where the beasts of the field will be your only companions. How can you, who long for the love and sympathy of man, preserve and persevere in this exile? You will return and again seek their kindness, and you will meet with their detestations. Your evil passions will be renewed, and you will then have a companion to aid you in the task of destruction. This may not be. Cease to argue the point, for I cannot consent. How inconstant are your feelings! But a moment ago you were moved by my representations, and why do you again harden yourself to my complaints? I swear to you, by the earth which I inhabit, and by you that made me, that with the companion you bestow I will quit the neighborhood of man, and dwell, as it may chance, in the most savage of places, my evil passions will have fled, for I shall meet with sympathy. My life will flow quietly away, and in my dying moments I shall not curse my Maker. His words had a strange effect on me. I compassionated him, and sometimes felt a wish to console him. But when I looked upon him, when I saw the filthy mass that moved and talked, my heart sickened, and my feelings were altered to those of horror and hatred. I tried to stifle these sensations. I thought that as I could not sympathize with him, I had no right to withhold from him the small portion of happiness which was yet in my power, to bestow. "You swear," I said, "to be harmless, but have you not already shown a degree of malice that should reasonably make me distrust you? May not even this be the feint that will increase your triumph by affording a wider scope of your revenge? How is this? I must not be trifled with, and I demand an answer. If I have no ties and no affections, hatred and vice must be my portion. The love of another will destroy the cause of my crimes, and I shall become a thing of whose existence every one will be ignorant. My vices are the children of a forced solitude that I abhor, and my virtues will necessarily arise when I live in communion with an equal. I shall feel the affections of a sensitive being, and become linked to the chain of existence and events from which I am now excluded." I paused some time to reflect on all that he had related, and the various arguments which he had employed. I thought of the promise of virtues which he had displayed on the opening of his existence, and the subsequent blight of all kindly feeling by the loathing and scorn which his protectors had manifested towards him. His power and threats were not omitted by my calculations. A creature who could exist in the ice caves of the glaciers and hide himself from the pursuit among the ridges of inaccessible precipices was a being possessing faculties it would be vain to cope with. After a long pause of reflection, I concluded that the justice due both to him and my fellow creatures demanded of him that I should comply with his request. Turning to him, therefore, I said, "I consent to your demand, on your solemn oath to quit Europe forever, and every other place in the neighborhood of man, as soon as I shall deliver into your hands a female who will accompany you in your exile." "I swear," he cried, "by the sun, and by the blue sky of heaven, and by the fire of love and burns in my heart, that if you grant my prayer, while they exist, you shall never behold me again. Depart to your home, and commence your labors. I shall watch your progress with unutterable anxiety, and fear not but that, when you are ready, I shall appear." Saying this, he suddenly quieted and quitted me, fearful, perhaps, of any change in my sentiments. I saw him descend the mountain with greater speed than the flight of an eagle, and quickly lost among the undulations of the sea of ice. His tale had occupied the whole day, and the sun was upon the verge of the horizon when he departed. I knew that I ought to hasten my descent towards the valley, as I should soon be encompassed in darkness, but my heart was heavy, and my steps slow. The labor of winding among the little paths of the mountain, and fixing my feet firmly as I advanced, perplexed me, occupied as I was by the emotions which the occurrences of the day had produced. Night was far advanced when I came to the half-way resting place and seated myself beside the fountain on the mountain. The stars shone at intervals as the clouds passed from over them. The dark pines rose before me, and every here and there a broken tree lay on the ground. It was a scene of wonderful solemnity, and stirred strange thoughts within me. I wept bitterly and clasped my hands in agony. I exclaimed, "Oh, Stars and clouds and winds, ye are all about to mock me. If ye really pity me, crush sensations and memory. Let me become as naught. But if not, depart, depart, and leave me in darkness. These were wild and miserable thoughts, but I cannot describe to you how the eternal twinkling of the stars weighed upon me, and how I listened to every blast of wind, as if it were a dull, ugly siroc on its way to consume me. Morning dawned before I arrived at the village of Chamonix. I took no rest, but returned immediately to Geneva. Even in my own heart I could not give expression to my sensations. They weighed on me with a mountain's weight, and their excess destroyed my agony beneath me. Thus I returned home, and entering the house, presented myself to the family. My haggard and wild appearance awoke intense alarm, but I answered no questions, scarcely did I speak. I felt as if I were placed under a ban, as if I had no right to claim my sympathies, as if never more might I enjoy companionship with them. Yet even thus I loved them to adoration, and to save them I resolved to dedicate myself to my utmost abhorring task. The prospect of such an occupation made every other circumstance of existence pass before me like a dream, and that thought only had to me the reality of life. So that, boys and girls, is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We're going to go to music break, but we'll return on Mary Shelley Frankenstein's Chapter 18. If you do have the book, feel free to read along. So on this break, we have Mr. Jeff Hillier from Los Angeles, California, Finger Bang Your Day, Silicone Wave, as well as Abandoned, and Consensual Sex Ban, which is one of my favorites. He's winning all kinds of awards and such for not only the music, but his videos, and we've had him on the show. I want to have him on again because I really enjoy his company. We also have Cockroach from the UK with We Play House. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
When your life is a never-ending train wreck, and you feel like you're drowning in a sea of regret, with a bit of oppression pressing down on your neck, it hurts so bad. When your overwhelming hatred kills your heart's desire, and reality starts looking like a dumpster fire, you start bitching to me, but you're preaching to the choir. You don't need to be so mad, 'cause sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we're sure there's no reason to try. When the whole world goes completely insane, open your heart, stand up and sing, I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah, I'll finger bang my day. That's right. You gotta make the choice to give it all you've got, and make your day moan with pleasure, really make it hot, because your day deserves a lover that pulls out the stops. Come on, it's not so hard, 'cause sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we share.
we really doing? We can't live in a world that has this much hate. We have to get honest with ourselves. We have to take stock in what our part is in all of this madness. We have to let go. And we focus on giving love, setting that intention. And each and every single one of us gets up every day with the intention to give love. And we do it. We go out there and we give love every single day. Each one of us gets out there and makes love to our day, giving our day a multiple orgasm. The whole world will be orgasmic for the rest of eternity. Sometimes we hurt, sometimes we cry, sometimes we should. There's no reason to try when the whole world is fucking insane. We open our hearts, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Finger bang my day. Finger bang my day. Let's open our hearts, stand up and sing. I'm gonna finger bang my day. Yeah, yeah. Finger bang my day. Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Let me take you far away from all this huff and puff. There will be nothing in between our love, like a pair of doves flying high above, where nothing can touch us, touching softly. Don't let me go, I won't let you go. This is eternity with me, baby. Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? You don't have to be magic, healthy laughter, boundaries, space, unknowing mutual consent, passion, happily we'll be bearing our souls, naked by the sea. We'll breathe the clean air. We'll be living, laughing, loving forever. Baby, do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? Do you wanna go for a ride in my consensual sex van? You don't have to be alone anymore. We will be together forever in love. Do you wanna go for a ride? Do you wanna go in my consensual? Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Just get in the van.
to get home. I spent all day tracking the shipment of my phone, all that she was lacking. I ordered custom, I can't wait to get some. Take it to the bedroom, bitches always nagging. Now I got the air, I send the bitches packing. Going my way, I have a new attraction. Don't care what you say, it's better in every way. Now baby, it's time to play. We're gonna make us a tape and show everyone the way. Cause I'm going my way, riding up Silicon Way. I'm see on the game with my new real dog. I'm gonna play. Just second way to Mount Silicon Way. She is here to stay. She's my new real dog, and it's time to play. She don't need expensive date nights. Never talks back, I'm always right. Stuff it in her face with all my might. She don't even care, we don't ever fight. She never cries when I'm testing the suspension. We blow it up like it's fucking Armageddon. We make the videos because this is perfection. Look at this erection, I don't need protection. Cause I'm going my way, riding up Silicon Way. I see on the game with my new real dog. I'm gonna play. Just second way to Mount Silicon Way. She is here to stay. She's my new real dog, and it's time to play. With my new real dog, I'm gonna play. She's my new real dog, and it's time to play.
The woman of my dreams.
Voulez-vous coucher avec moi?
Fais-moi l'amour.
Je suis amoureux.
Je pense toujours à
Enchanté,
tu es charmant.
ma chérie. Mon petit osnesti. Ils étaient le nipple.
Tu es chaud. Fais-moi l'amour.
It's like living on a super yacht, making love to a robot. It's like owning a football team, but having sex with a robot. It's like winning an Oscar and Emmy or Grammy when you're fucking a robot. It's like saving a family with a newborn from a fire, but you're fucking a robot. I'm going my way, riding up Silicon Way. I see on the game with my new real dog. I'm gonna play. Just second way to Mount Silicon Way. She is here to stay. She's my new real dog, and it's time to play. Left here alone, just a shadow of my erection on the wall. Why won't you answer my calls? I gave you my all with the love we made together. Oh
We play house. We play house. We play house. We play house.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. That was Jeff Hilliard. I just love his music. I can't help it. Like, as a kid, at night, we'd turn on the stereo, we'd listen to the Dr. Demento show, and they always had like Weird Al Yankovic and so many different people on there playing satirical music, and that's what Jeff does. It's satirical music. It's supposed to be funny. I don't know. I find it funny. I can relate to a lot of these videos, and I just really love his music. He's winning all kinds of awards right now on all kinds of film festivals, different places. Like, he is just raking it in. I hope that he gets out there and he makes it big because he really deserves it. I love Jeff. He's amazing. He's actually from Kansas. Now he's a California boy. And then we had Cockroach with We Play House, and Cockroach is from the UK. We have a lot of friends over there. Hello. Good early morning to you. I hope your day goes wonderful. I hope all this shit going on with Russia and Ukraine is not messing up your jive. And then that lady quitting her job. I am not a quitter. Well, you just quit. And I don't know. Makes you wonder what's about to happen. Anywho's, I apologize to the people in the chat. So on my computer where chat is involved, I'm wondering if I'm gonna make it little. Oh, and then I'm gonna make it big again. Pretty talented. But yeah, the chat from Sandra and Champ did not show up on my board here on the computer, but I have it pulled up on my phone because that's where it came through. And I saw that you guys were in the chat room. I was just like, where is everybody? Did I scare you away with my scary costumes? I'm sorry. Jason Voorhees, I've worn him a few times. I was a skeleton. I was also a witch a couple times. this Halloween for me is not just one day, it's a whole month of dressing up every weekend. You got it. That's a good way to stay young, I think. Anywho's, let's revert back to Mary Shelley's horror classic, Frankenstein. I hope you guys have enjoyed it so far. I have. I really love it. And I'm thinking The Bride of Frankenstein is actually another book, but I think she's about to come in here pretty soon. So we don't have too much longer until we get to The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's going to be awesome. And it's actually looks like quite a short book. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yep, we're pretty close to the end in this book. Maybe one more reading. We'll finish this one and get into The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde by Mr. Robert Louis Stevenson. All right, well, let us commence. Chapter 18. Day after day, week after week passed away on my return to Geneva, and I could not collect the courage to recommence my work. I feared the vengeance of the disappointed fiend, yet I was unable to overcome my repugnance to the task which was enjoyed me. I found that I could not compose a female without again devoting several months to profound study and laborious disquisition. I had heard of some discoveries having been made by an English philosopher, the knowledge of which was material to my success, and I sometimes thought of obtaining my father's consent to visit England for this purpose. But I clung to every patience of delay, and shrank from taking the first step in an undertaking whose immediate necessity began to appear less absolute to me. A change had indeed taken place in me. My health, which had hitherto declined, was now much destroyed, and my spirits, when unchecked by the memory of my unhappy promise, rose proportionably. My father saw this change with pleasure, and he turned his thoughts towards the best method of eradicating the remains of my melancholy, which every now and then would return by fits, and with a devouring blackness overcast the approaching sunshine. At these moments I took refuge in the most perfect solitude. I passed whole days on the lake, alone, in a little boat, watching the clouds and listening to the rippling of the waves, silent and listless. But the fresh air and the bright sun seldom failed to restore me to some degree of composure, and on my return I met the salutations of my friends with a readier smile and a more cheerful heart. It was after my return from one of those rambles that my father, calling me aside, thus addressed me. "I am happy to remark, my dear son, that you have resumed your former pleasures, and seem to be returning to yourself. And yet you are still unhappy, and still avoid our society. For some time I was lost in conjecture as to the cause, and still avoid our society. For some time I was lost in conjecture as to the cause of this, but yesterday an idea struck me, and if it is well founded, I conjure to you to avow it. Reserve on me such a point would be not only useless, but draw down treble misery on us all." I trembled violently at this exordium, and my father continued, "I confess, my son, that I have always looked forward to your marriage with our dear Elizabeth as the tie of our domestic comfort, and the stay of my declining years. You were attached to each other from your earliest infancy. You studied together, and appeared in dispositions and taste entirely suited to one another. But so blind is the experience of man that what I conceived to be the best assistance to my plan may have entirely destroyed it. You, perhaps, regard her as your sister without any wish that she might become your wife. Nay, you may have met with without any wish that she might become your wife. Nay, you have met with another whom you may love, and consider yourself as bound in honour to Elizabeth. This struggle may occasion the poignant misery which you appear to feel. My dear father, reassure yourself. I love my cousin tenderly and sincerely. I never saw any woman who excited, as Elizabeth does, my warmest admiration and affection. My future hopes and prospects are entirely bound up in the expectation of our union. The expression of our sentiments of this subject, my dear Victor, gives me more pleasure than I have for some time experienced. If you feel thus, we shall assuredly be happy. However, present events may cast a gloom over us. But it is this gloom which appears to have taken so strong a hold of your mind that I wish to dissipate. Tell me, therefore, whether you object to an immediate solemnization of the marriage. We have been unfortunate, and recent events have drawn us from that everyday tranquillity befitted my years and infirmities. You are younger, yet I do not suppose, possessed as you are of the competent fortune, that an early marriage would at all interfere with any future plans of honour and utility that you may have formed. Do not suppose, however, that I wish to dictate happiness to you, or that a delay on your part would cause me any serious uneasiness. Interpret my words with candour, and answer me, I conjure you, with confidence and sincerity. I listened to my father in silence, and remained for some time incapable of offering any reply. I revolved rapidly in my mind a multitude of thoughts, and endeavoured to arrive at some conclusion. Alas! To me the idea of an immediate union with my Elizabeth was one of honour and dismay. I was bound by a solemn promise, which I had not yet fulfilled, and dared not break. Or if I did, what manifold miseries might not impend over me and my devoted family! Could I enter into a festival with this deadly weight yet hanging round my neck, and bowing me to the ground? I must perform my engagement, and let the monster depart with his mate, before I allow myself to enjoy the delight of a union from which I expected peace. I remember also the necessity it posed upon me of either journeying to England or entering into a correspondence with whose philosophers of that country, whose knowledge and discoveries were indispensable, use to me in my present undertaking. The latter method of obtaining the desired intelligence was dilatory and unsatisfactory. Besides, I had an insurmountable aversion to the idea of engaging myself in my loathsome task in my father's house, while in habits of familiar intercourse with those I loved. I knew that 1,000 fearful accidents might occur, the slightest of which would disclose a tale to thrill all connected with me with horror. I was aware also that I should often lose all self-command, all capacity of hiding and harrowing sensations that would possess me during the progress of my unearthly occupation. I must absent myself from all I loved while thus employed. Once commenced, it would quickly be achieved, and I might be restored to my family in peace and happiness. My promise fulfilled, the monster would depart forever, or, so my fond fancy imagined, some accident might meanwhile occur to destroy him, and put an end to my slavery forever. The feelings dictated my answer to my father. I expressed a wish to visit England, but concealing the true reasons of this request, I clothed my desires into a guise which I excited no suspicion, while I urged my desire with an earnestness that easily induced my father to comply. After so long a period of an absorbing melancholy that resembled madness in its intensity and effects, he was glad to find that I was capable of taking pleasure in the idea of such a journey, and he hoped that change of scene and varied amusement would before my return have restored me entirely to myself. The duration of my absence was left to my own choice. A few months, or at most a year, was the period contemplated. One paternal kind precaution he had taken to ensure my having a companion, without previously communicating with me. He had, in concert with Elizabeth, arranged that Clerval should join me in Strasbourg. This interfered with the solitude I coveted for the prosecution of my task. Yet at the commencement of my journey the presence of my fiend, my friend, could in no way be an impediment, and truly I rejoiced that thus I should be saved many hours of lonely, maddening reflection. Nay, Henry might stand between me and hours of the intrusion of my foe. If I were alone, would he not at times force his abhorred presence on me, to remind me of my task or to contemplate its progress? To England, therefore, I was bound, and it was understood that my union with Elizabeth should take place immediately on my return. My father's age rendered him extremely averse to delay. For myself, there was one reward I promised myself from my detested toils. One consolation for my unapparelled sufferings, it was the prospect of that day when, enfranchised from my miserable slavery, I might claim Elizabeth, and forget the past in union with her. I now made arrangements for my journey, but one feeling haunted to me, which filled me with fear and agitation. During my absence, I should leave my friends unconscious of the existence of their enemy, and unprotected from his attacks, exasperated as he might be by my departure. But he had promised to follow me wherever I might go, and would he not accompany me to England? This imagination was dreadful in itself, but soothing, inasmuch as it supposed the safety of my friends. I was agonized with the idea of the possibility that the reverse of this might happen. But through the whole period during which I was the slave of my creature, I allowed myself to be governed by the impulses of the moment, and my present sensations strongly intimated that the fiend would follow me, and exempt my family from the danger of his machinations. It was in the latter end of September that I again quitted my native country. My journey had been my own suggestion, and Elizabeth therefore acquiesced, but she was filled with disquiet at the idea of my suffering, away from her, the inroads of misery and grief. It had been her care which provided me a companion in Clairvaux, and yet a man is blind to see 1,000 miniature circumstances which call forth a woman's sedulous attention. She longed to bid me hasten my return. 1,000 conflicting emotions rendered her mute, as she bade me a tearful, silent farewell. I threw myself into the carriage that was to convey me away, hardly knowing whither I was going, and careless of what was passing around. I remembered only that it was with a bitter anguish that I reflected on it, to order that my chemical instruments should be packed to go with me. Filled with dreary imaginations, I passed through many beautiful and majestic scenes, but my eyes were fixed and unobserving. I could only think of the bourne of my travels, and the work that was to occupy me whilst they endured. After some days spent in listless indolence, during which I traversed many leagues, I arrived at Strasbourg, where I waited 2 days for Clairvaux. He came, alas, how great was the contrast between us! He was alive to every new scene, joyful when he saw the beauties of the setting sun, and more happy when he beheld it rise and recommence a new day. He pointed out to me the shifting colours of the landscape and appearances of the sky. "This is what it is to live," he cried. "Now I enjoy existence, but you, my dear Frankenstein, wherefore are you desponding and sorrowful? In truth, I was occupied by gloomy thoughts, and neither saw the descent of the evening star nor the golden sunrise reflected in the Rhine, and you, my friend, would be far more amused with the journal of Clerval, who observed the scenery with an eye of feeling and delight, than in listening to my reflections. I, a miserable wretch, haunted by a curse that shut up every avenue to enjoyment." We had agreed to descend the Rhine in a boat from Strasbourg to Rotterdam, whence we might take shipping for London. During this voyage we passed many willowy islands, and saw several beautiful towns. We stayed a day in Mannheim, and on the 5th from our departure from Strasbourg arrived at Mainz. The course of the Rhine below Mainz becomes much more picturesque. The river descends rapidly, and the winds between hills, not high, but steep, and of beautiful forms. We saw many ruined castles standing on the edges of the precipices, surrounded by black woods, high and inaccessible. This part of the Rhine, indeed, presents a singularly variegated landscape. In one spot you view rugged hills, ruined castles, overlooking tremendous precipices with the dark Rhine brushes beneath, and on the sudden turn of the promontory flourishing vineyards with green sloping banks, and a meandering river and populous towns occupy the scene. We travelled at the time of the vintage, and heard the song of the labourers as we glided down the stream. Even I, depressed in mind, and my spirits continually agitated by gloomy feelings, even I was pleased. I lay at the bottom of the boat, and as I gazed on the cloudless blue sky, I seemed to drink in a tranquillity to which I had long been a stranger. And if these were my sensations, who can describe those of Henry? He felt as if he had been transported to fairyland, and enjoyed a happiness seldom tasted by men. "I have seen," he said, "the most beautiful scenes of my own country. I have visited the lakes of Lucerne and Uri, where the snowy mountains descend almost perpendicularly to the water, casting black and impenetrable shades, which would cause a gloomy and mournful appearance were it not for the most verdant islands that relieve the eye by their gay appearance. I have seen this lake agitated by a tempest, when the wind tore up whirlwinds of water, and gave you an idea of what the waterspout must be on the great ocean, and the waves dashed with fury the base of the mountain, where the priest and his mistress were overwhelmed by an avalanche, and where the dying voices are still said to be heard amid the pauses of the nightly wind. I have seen the mountains of La Valais and the Pays de Vaud, but this country, Victor, pleases me more than all those wonders. The mountains of Switzerland are more majestic and strange, but there is a charm in the banks of this divine river, and I never before saw equal. Look at the castle which overhangs yon precipice, and that also in the island, almost concealed amongst the foliage of those lovely trees, and now that group of labourers coming from among their vines, and that village half hid in the recess of the mountain. Oh, surely the spirit that inhabits the guards this place has a soul more in harmony with man than those who pile the glacier or retire to the inaccessible peaks of the mountains of their own country. Clerval, beloved friend, even now it delights me to record your words and to dwell on the praise of which you are so eminently deserving. He was a being formed in the very poetry of nature. His wild and enthusiastic imagination was chastened by the sensibility of his heart. His soul overflowed with ardent affections, and his friendship was of that devoted and wondrous nature that the worldly minded teach us to look for only in imagination. But even human sympathies were not sufficient to satisfy his eager mind. The scenery of external nature, which others regard only with admiration, he loved with ardor. The sounding cataract, haunted him like a passion, the tall clock, the tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood. Their colors and their forms were then to him an appetite, a filling, and a love that had no need of a remoter charm, by thought supplied, or an interest unborrowed from the eye. And that was from Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey, and that's an author's footnote. And where does he now exist? Is this gentle and lovely being lost forever? Has his mind, so replete with ideas, imaginations fanciful and magnificent, which formed the world, whose existence depended on the life of its creator, has this mind perished? Does it now only exist in my memory? No, it's not thus. Your form, so divinely wrought and beamed with beauty, has decayed, but your spirit still visits and consoles your unhappy friend. Pardon this gush of sorrow. These ineffectual words are but a slight tribute to the unexampled worth of Henry, but they soothe my heart, and following with the anguish which his remembrance creates, I will proceed with my tale. Beyond Cologne, we descended to the plains of Holland, and we resolved to post the remainder of our way, for the wind was contrary, and the stream of the river was too gentle to aid us. Our journey was lost, and the interest arising from beautiful scenery, but we arrived in a few days at Rotterdam, whence we proceeded by sea to England. It was on a clear morning, and in the latter days of December, that I first saw the white cliffs of Britain. The banks of the Thames presented a new scene. They were flat, but saw Tilbury Fort. They were flat but fertile, and almost every town was marked by the remembrance of some story. We saw Tilbury Fort, and remembered the Spanish Armada, Gravesend, Woolwich, and Greenwich, places which I had heard of even in my country. At length we saw the numerous steeples of London, St. Paul's towering above all, and the Tower, famed in English history. Chapter 19. London was our present point of rest. We determined to remain several months in this wonderful and celebrated city. Clerval decided and desired the intercourse of the men of genius and talent who flourished at this time, but this was with me a secondary object. I was principally occupied with the means of obtaining the information necessary for the completion of my promise, and quickly availed myself of the letters of introduction that I had brought with me, addressed to the most distinguished natural philosopher. If this journey had taken place during my days of study and happiness, it would have afforded me inexpressible pleasure. But a blight had come over my existence, and I only visited these people for the sake of the information they might give me on the subject in which my interest was so terribly profound. Company was irksome to me. When alone, I could fill my mind with the sights of heaven and earth. The voice of Henry soothed me, and I could thus cheat myself into a transitory peace. But busy, uninteresting, joyous faces brought back despair to my heart. I saw an insurmountable barrier placed between me and my fellow men. This barrier was sealed with the blood of William and Justine, and to reflect on the events connected with those names filled my soul with anguish. But in Clerval I saw the image of my former self. He was inquisitive and anxious to gain experience and instruction. The difference of manners which he observed was to him an inexhaustible source of instruction and amusement. He was also pursuing an object he had long had in view. His design was to visit India in the belief that he had in his knowledge of its various languages and in the views he had taken of its society the means of materially assisting the progress of European colonization and trade. In Britain only could he further the execution of his plan. He was forever busy, and the only check to his enjoyments was my sorrowful and dejected mind. I tried to conceal this as much as possible, that I might not debate him from the pleasures natural to one. He was entering on a new scene of life, undisturbed by any care of bitter recollection. I often refused to accompany him, alleging another engagement, that I might remain alone. I now also began to collect the materials necessary for my new creation, and this was to me like the torture of single drops of water continually falling on my head. Every thought that was devoted to it was an extreme anguish, and every word that I spoke in allusion to it caused my lips to quiver, and my heart to palpitate. After passing some months in London, we received a letter from a person in Scotland, who had formerly been our visitor in Geneva. He mentioned the beauties of his native country, and asked us if those were not sufficient allurements to induce us to prolong our journey as far north as Perth, where he resided. Clerval eagerly desired to accept this invitation, and I, although I abhorred society, wished to view again mountains and streams and all the wondrous works with which nature adorns her chosen dwelling places. We had arrived in England at the beginning of October, and it was now February. We accordingly determined to commence our journey towards the north at the expiration of another month. In this expedition we did not intend to follow the great road of Edinburgh, but to visit Windsor, Oxford, Matlock, and the Cumberland Lakes, resolving to arrive at the completion of this tour about the end of July. I packed up my chemical instruments and the materials I had collected, resolving to finish my labours in some obscure nook in the northern Highlands of Scotland. We quitted London on the 27th of March and remained a few days at Windsor, rambling in its beautiful forest. This was a new scene to us mountaineers. The majestic oaks, the quantity of game, and the herds of stately deer were all novelties to us. From thence we proceeded to Oxford. As we entered this city, our minds were filled with the remembrance of the events that had been transacted there more than a century and a half before. It was here that Charles I had collected his forces. This city had remained faithful to him, after the whole nation had forsaken his cause to join the standard of Parliament and liberty. The memory of that unfortunate king and his companions, the amiable Falkland and insolent Goring, his queen and son, gave a peculiar interest to every part of the city, which they might be supposed to have inhabited. The spirit of elder days found a dwelling here, and we delighted to trace its footsteps. If these feelings had not found an imaginary gratification, the appearance of the city had yet in itself sufficient beauty to obtain our admiration. The colleges are ancient and picturesque, and the streets are almost magnificent, and the lovely Isis which flows beside it through meadows and of exquisite verdure is spread forth into a placid expanse of waters, which reflects its majestic ensemble of towers and spires and domes, embossed among aged trees. I enjoyed this scene, and yet my enjoyment was embittered both by the memory of the past and the anticipation of the future. I was formed for peaceful happiness. During my youthful days, discontent never visited my mind, and if I was ever overcome by ennui, The sight of what is beautiful in nature, or the study of what is excellent and sublime in the productions of man, could always interest my heart, and communicate elasticity to my spirits. But I am blasted tree. The bolt has entered my soul, and I felt then that I should survive to exhibit what I shall soon cease to be, a miserable spectacle of wrecked humanity, pitiable to others and intolerable to myself. We passed a considerable period at Oxford, rambling among its environs and endeavouring to identify every spot which might relate to the most animated epoch of English history. Our little voyages of discovery were often prolonged by the successive objects that presented themselves. We visited the tomb of the illustrious Hampden, and the field on which that patriot fell. For a moment my soul was elevated from its debasing and miserable fears, to contemplate the divine ideas of liberty and self-sacrifice, of which these sites were the monuments and the remembrancers. For an instant I dared to shake off my chains, and look around me with a free and lofty spirit, but the iron had eaten into my flesh, and I sank again, trembling and hopeless, into my miserable self. We left Oxford with great and proceeded to Matlock, which was our next place of rest. The country in the neighbourhood of this village resembled to a greater degree the scenery of Switzerland. But everything is on a lower scale, and the green hills want the crown of distant white Alps, which always attend on the Pitti, and the piny mountains, green hills, everything of my native country. We visited the wondrous cave and the little cabinets of natural history, where the curiosities are disposed in the same manner as in the collections of Cerveau and Chamonix. The latter name made me tremble when pronounced by Henri. I hastened to quit Matlock, with which that terrible scene was thus associated. From Derby, still journeying northwards, we passed 2 months in Cumberland and Westmoreland. I could now almost fancy myself among the Swiss mountains. The little patches of snow which yet lingered on the northern sides of the mountains, the lakes, and the dashing of the rocky streams were all familiar and dear sights to me. Here also we made some acquaintances, who almost contrived to cheat me into happiness. The delight of Clerval was proportionably greater than mine. His mind expanded in the company of men of talent, and he found in his own nature greater capacities and resources than he could have imagined himself to have possessed while he associated with his inferiors. "I could pass my life here," he said to me, "and among these mountains I should scarcely regret Switzerland and the Rhine." But he found that a traveller's life is one that includes much pain amidst his enjoyments. His feelings are forever in the stretch, and when he begins to sink into repose, he finds himself obliged to quit that on which he rests in pleasure for something new, which again engages his attention, and which also he forsakes for other novelties. We had scarcely visited various lakes of Cumberland and Westmoreland, and conceived an affection for some of the inhabitants, when the period of our appointment with our Scotch friend approached, and we left them to travel on. For my own part I was not sorry. I had now neglected my promise for some time, and I feared the effects of the Damon's disappointment. He might remain in Switzerland, and wreak his vengeance on my relatives. This idea pursued me, and tormented me at every moment from which I might otherwise have snatched repose and peace. I waited for my letters with feverish impatience. If they were delayed, I was miserable, and overcome by 1,000 fears, and when they arrived I saw the subscription of Elizabeth for my father. I hardly dared to read or ascertain my fate. Sometimes I thought that the fiend followed me, and might expedite my remissness by murdering my companion. When these thoughts possessed me, I would not quit Henry for a moment, but followed him as his shadow, to protect him from the fancied rage of his destroyer. I felt as if I had committed some great crime, the consciousness of which haunted me. I was guiltless, but I had indeed drawn down a horrible curse upon my head, as mortal as that of crime. I visited Edinburgh with languid eyes and mind, and yet the city might have interested the most unfortunate being. Clerval did not like it so well as Oxford, for the antiquity of the latter city was more pleasing to him. But the beauty and regularity of the new town of Edinburgh, its romantic castle and its environs, the most delightful in the world, Arthur's Seat, St. Bernard's Well, and the Pentland Hills, compensated him for the change, and filled him with cheerfulness and admiration. But, as I was impatient to arrive at the termination of my journey, we left Edinburgh in a week, passing through Cooper, St. Andrews, and along the banks of the Tay to Perth, where our friend expected us. But I was in no mood to laugh and talk with strangers, or enter into their feelings or plans with good humour expected from a guest, and accordingly I told Clerval that I wished to make the tour of Scotland alone. "Do you," said I, "enjoy yourself, and let this be our rendezvous. I may be absent a month or two, but do not interfere with my emotions. I entreat you, leave me to peace and solitude for a short time, and when I return, I hope it will be with a lighter heart, more congenial to your own temper." Henry wished to dissuade me, but seeing me bent on this plan, ceased remonstrate. He entreated me to write often. "I'd rather be with you," he said, "in your solitary rambles than with these Scotch people, whom I do not know. Hasten then, my dear friend, to return, that I may again feel myself somewhat at home, which I cannot do in your absence." Having parted from my friend, I determined to visit some remote spot of Scotland, and finish my work in solitude. I did not doubt but that the monster followed me, and would discover himself to me when I should have finished, that he might receive his companion. With this resolution I traversed the northern Highlands, and fixed on one of the remotest of the Orkneys as the scene of my labours. It was a place fitted for such a work, being hardly more than a rock, whose high sides were continually beaten upon by the waves. The soil was barren, scarcely affording pasture for a few miserable cows, and oatmeal for its inhabitants, which consisted of 5 persons, whose gaunt and scraggy limbs gave tokens of their miserable fare. Vegetables and bread, when they indulged in such luxuries, and even fresh water, was to be procured from the mainland, which was about 5 miles distant. On the whole island there were but 3 miserable huts, and one of these as vacant when I arrived. This I hired. It contained but 2 rooms, and these exhibited all the squalidness of the most miserable penury. The thatch had fallen in, and the walls were unplastered, and the door was off its hinges. I ordered it to be repaired, bought some furniture, and took possession. An incident which would doubtless have occasioned some surprise, had not all the senses of the cottagers been denumbed by want and squalid poverty. As it was, I lived ungazed at and unmolested, heartily thanked for the pittance of food and clothes which I gave. So much does suffering blunt even the coarsest sensations of man. In this retreat I devoted the morning to labour, but in the evening, when the weather permitted, I walked on the stony beach of the sea to listen to the waves. as they roared and dashed at my feet. It was a monotonous yet unchanging scene. I thought of Switzerland. It was far different than this desolate and appalling landscape. Its hills are covered with veins, and its cottages are scattered thinly in plains. Its fair lakes reflect a blue and gentle sky, and when troubled by the winds their tumult is but as the play of the lively infant when compared to the roarings of the giant ocean. In this manner I distributed my occupants and occupations when I first arrived, but as I proceeded in my labor it became every day more horrible and irksome to me. Sometimes I could not prevail on myself to enter my laboratory for several days, and at other times I toiled day and night in order to complete my work. It was indeed a filthy process in which I was engaged. During my first experiment, a kind of enthusiastic frenzy had blinded me to the horror of my employment. My mind was intently fixed on the consummation of my labor, and my eyes shut to the horror of my proceedings. But now I went to it in cold blood, and my heart often sickened at the work of my hands. This situated employment in the most detestable occupation, immersed in a solitude where nothing could for an instant call my attention from the actual scene in which I was engaged. My spirits became unequal. I grew restless and nervous. Every moment I feared to meet my persecutor. Sometimes I sat with my eyes fixed on the ground, fearing to raise them, lest they should encounter the object which I so much dreaded to behold. I feared to wander from the sight of my fellow creatures, lest when alone he should come to claim his companion. In the meantime I worked on, and my labor was already considerably advanced. I looked towards its contemplation and completion with a tremulous and eager hope, which I dared not trust myself to question, but which was intermixed with the obscure forebodings of evil that made my heart sicken in my bosom. Well, on that note, boys and girls, we are going to finish for this evening reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and we'll continue on next hour with Reddit Ghost Stories. On this music break, we have my best friend, Miss Mia Savage, with her group Antidote for Savages with Lemurian Crypto. We have Mr. Jeff Hilliard, once more from Los Angeles, California, with Multitude, Good Life, and Cock That Hills. And then we have Cockroach from the UK with ICU. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break.
I got molar moves, got that molar too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these molar moves. You need a molar too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long, never gonna cut it.
All these hookers sweet on me. Look at them chasing me, showing me that ass. And I banged up snatch. I do this shit for free. Go down your mom till 3. She's taking selfies with the mullet like it's history. How can I maneuver you with that pussy, dude? You sit like Buddha waiting on it to come to you. My lines are straight to the point. She shows me gratitude. So what's your latitude? Let's adjust your attitude. Head with a alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini.
I got molar moves, I got that molar too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that.
Head with a alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini.
Check these molar moves. You need a molar too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long, never gonna cut it.
Alligator, double dually Lamborghini. All up in a silly little yellow polka dot bikini. You're like the butt of a butter knife cutting up panini. So climb back in your kangaroo pouch like a rolling genie. These moves are hot, these locks I got. This power cannot be disputed and it can't be bought. So you can find me in the studio with all these thoughts. You wanna buy my style, but you can't be what you're not, neighbor.
I got molar moves, I got that molar too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these molar moves. You need a molar too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long, never gonna cut it. Got that motherfucking ballin'. You wanna touch it?
Yeah. Next time you come around here with your bitch ass, just remember how my mullet makes your hose pussy drip, drip, drip.
I got molar moves, I got that molar too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these molar moves. You need a molar too. I can do no wrong. Never gonna cut it. I got molar moves, I got that molar too. You think it's wrong? Back of the head too long. Fuck that. Check these molar moves. You need a molar too. I can do no wrong. Back of the head long. Never gonna cut it. Never gonna cut it. Never gonna cut it.
Drip, drip,
Molar moves.
Just a molar, bitch.
Molar moves.
drip, drip.
Molar moves. Never gonna cut it.
Excuse me! Excuse me! You got a cigarette? Hey, you help a guy out with some spare change. Anything will do, man. Oh, God bless. Can I just get your change? I missed the bus. I got these 6 right there. I'm not an animal! Moving like a steak knife. This is a good life. Dancing in the moonlight. I wanna be inside of you. We got plenty to do till the 1:45, and I know you
You want
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. This evening, we have been reading from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Now, during this third hour, we are on our way over to Reddit Ghost Stories. So this first story comes from u/wonderful_ad_7076. Tall man. And this is under advice, so maybe he's looking for advice? When I was 3, current day, I would see this tall man who is about 8 feet tall, and I originally thought it was sleep paralysis until my friend saw it and described it exactly how I did. And I ended up going into concealing for it, and they thought maybe it was 'cause of anxiety, but it wasn't. And I recently started screaming and crying for my parents because of it, and does anyone know what this could be? Yeah, pretty sure it's the tall man. I actually encountered tall man at my sister's house about 3 or 4 Halloweens ago. I was there. First, it started with I could see somebody tall standing in the doorway, but my senses were overcome by these 2 little toddlers, 2 little twin toddlers. They were so cute. And one was kind of sitting there at the door, rocking back and forth, and the other one tumbled its way out the door because I told him, you don't have to be entrapped in there. You're free. Come out. And so the first one toddled out and came over towards me, and then the second one did, and that made the tall man very angry because I'm pretty sure he had collected their souls in some way or another. And yeah, he had them prisoners. So once they got out, he got really mad and he ended up coming out of that room and going to the end of the hallway. And yeah, he used to project his face at me. Like, that's really freaky, but he'd project his face towards me to where, like, he was standing in the hallway, but his face was like gigantic in my face. And then later on that night, I called my husband and fell asleep on the phone, and he heard some things going on. And I was actually assaulted by the tall man that evening. Even though when I woke up, I said, my blankets are where I left them, everything's fine, like nothing happened. But he said he heard a lot of stuff going on the phone, so I have to just trust him and what he's saying, I suppose. So, let's move on to the next story. This one is by user/extra_sheepherder_45. Did I see a ghost or have a paranormal experience? And this was posted only 2 hours ago. So 2 things happened to me recently, and I'm not sure if it was coincidence or paranormal. So first thing happened around a month ago, and I walked into my bathroom, and my cat was in there, and my family is also in the house. So I crack the door, and I go pee, and I hear the door shut, not too hard, but not too soft, and I get done thinking my family shut it, but I see my cat just kind of staring at the door, and the cats in my house are smart. If a door is cracked, they know how to open it, and the room is hardly any airflow in it, and I asked my family if they shut the door, but they said no. One thing I forgot to mention is it's not a house, but an apartment building above a hardware store, and there's 2 stories to the apartment. So I'll explain on like the main street of my town, so you can enter the hardware store or go a little ways to our entrance, and it requires a key, so it's like 20 stairs to our level, then 10 stairs to the hardware store. It was a really big basement, almost like a maze, and the building is probably about 100 years old, like all the other buildings in my town. I don't know any history of this place, but I do know it's kind of creepy. Second experience, this was like a few days ago, and I was walking towards the entrance down my street, and I see a man peek around the corner of the entrance of our building. It's kind of a nook in the building, and the man is wearing a gray shirt. I'm almost done. And looks to be of a Hispanic descent with short hair. And I walk to the entrance with my mom and two sisters and don't see the man. And I look down the street. No one who looks like him. And like I said, the door requires a key. It's 20 steps up the first flight and 10 up the second flight. But I saw the man turn around and disappear. So we open the door, go up the stairs with my sister to let our dog in our apartment, and she accidentally lets it go. And it runs up the stairs and up halfway through the second flight, staring at the top. So we get our dog and leave. I told my mom, and she's seen weird stuff here also, but I've never seen that man before or since then. Sorry if it was long or parts were vague. Feel free to ask questions. I'll try to respond. So, do you know where there's a hairbrush? Right there. Some kisses. Yeah, it's right there where my deodorant and powder is. See it? Put it back. Okay. Like tomorrow. This is by user, so when you look it up, it's u/top_I64. The Shadows Dance. I was 3 years old and moving into a new house for the first time. The home we lived in before was a rental, and the owners kicked us out with only 5 months of forewarning. Only 5 months! Oh no. I have little memory due to being an infant, but I do remember small bits and pieces like having to be potty trained before moving. When we got to the house, I was ready to play with random things my mom packed for me, but we had to do some home warming stuff, and I met the kids next door. They were a Muslim family and greeted us with a feast of some kebabs and rice. Ramadan had just ended, and they had a tradition of having a feast at the end. Then one of the children, Hassin, whispered to us, "Sometimes I see shadows dance across the room. I wonder if you'll see them too." I went on without much thought of what he had said, since at the time I still believed toys were alive. That night I lay in my bed, hugging my Care Bear plush, when I saw these shadows summon out of the floor and dance across the room, whirling, flying, and bowing. Then they receded into the floor. I laughed to myself, oblivious to the strangeness of those events. Then, in the corner of the room, a shadow around the size of a 7-year-old walked to me slowly. I got scared and cried for my mom. He came over, comforted me, and said it was just a bad dream, and brought me to her room to sleep. As the parents' bed magic goes, I woke up in my own bed with no proof I was in her bed to begin with, and went on with my day. For the next couple of years, the shadows kept dancing in my room. I named them and befriended them, at least in my mind. I eventually learned my house was built upon an old graveyard with bodies that were never moved. Those shadows were likely the ghosts of the deceased dancing until the end of time and trying to contact the living. Shadow Man with Dog. This is by u/background right 8796. When I was younger, I saw a shadow man standing in front of my house in the front yard under the willow tree, and it was dark out. I stared at him for a long time because I knew he would disappear when I looked away. He was wearing what looked like a cape or a trench coat, and the collar was up. He had a dog. It looks pretty big, maybe fluffy even. But the neighbor's dog would bark, and it would look over where they were and growl and act as if it was to lunge in that direction, and that the shadow man had a hand on the dog and he would pet it when it did this, and the dog would look back at me and put its head down as if stalking me. I screamed to my family without looking away. Everyone came out and looked, saw nothing. My mother had me describe him, and she started crying, saying she saw the same thing before but didn't see him now. There was no way I wouldn't have known she had seen him before. He never told us about us kids or about it to us kids. Not until we mentioned it. She had always seen things that wasn't there, but this in pituitary really scared her. It had a bad energy, and the fact that I could hear the dog growling made it much worse. I couldn't see his face, but I had a gut feeling he was smiling at me. He never once looked away. Finally, I did, and when I looked back, he was gone. I don't know about you guys, but me and my family, we've had so many different experiences with the shadow man. So for my son, he actually saw the shadow man right in front of my studio door here. So sometimes on the weekends, when the kids are to go to bed, they'll come to bed in my bed. And he had put himself to bed in my bed, and he was laying there and looking towards my door, probably expecting me to come out or something. And all of a sudden, he sees this hat man. And this man has a hat and a trench coat with the fold around the neck. You know, you can pop it up, you can pop it down, whatever. It's kind of like a raincoat. Anywho's, he saw this hat man, and then the hat man dissipated. And that very same night, my daughter, living in Ignacio, she actually lived in a house that used to be a Catholic church, of all things. They went into the attic. They found some tapes and weird bubbly rocks and different things like that. Different people took different things. I wish they would have given me the tapes, but they threw the tapes away. I think some of them were saved, but after that, the Hat Man started to appear. Not only did the Hat Man appear, his little minions, most of whom which do not want to be implored by him, if they could do anything to get out of his power, they will. But yeah, so first I saw the little minion dude, and he's just kind of hunkering by either the love seat or the couch or the chair, or wherever Kenzie's going. He's hunkering down there. He looks very sad. He looks like he doesn't want to be doing what he's doing. And then all of a sudden I see the Hat Man, and it's kind of like an aura, but the opposite of an aura. It's like instead of seeing the light, you see the dark outlines. And I was wondering, is this the cars passing by, etc., etc., except for it would go from the floor or from the wall into the floor and then go into another room and be there. And then it would go down into the floor again and pop up in another place. It was not cars going by, it was something very, very scary. And it made my daughter so scared, like just looking at her eyes, you would think she was on drugs, the way her pupils were dilating and everything. But guess what? This is adrenaline. This is fear. And she had that happening to her. Luckily she moved out. Luckily she left that guy. One of the things she saw was her and Timmy are sitting watching scary movies. And they both fell asleep, and then she woke up and she saw Timmy. He was like years from now, how he looked. He was all sucked up. He had these old, like, hungy dungy dungy, like, boxer brief thingies on. And they were all dingy and holey and scrappy. And She walked past him, and then he looked up at her, and she realized it was Timmy. That was the future Timmy. It was so weird. So she jumped past him, went to her room, and I guess he was laying there in the bed. And that's when she realized that wasn't Timmy in the living room. That was Timmy from the future or whatever. He was very abusive. He used to put her head through the wall, punch her, kick her, whatever. But yeah, her head went through the wall several times, so she actually connected with this house in a certain extent. But her friends did take the Satanic Bible. They did take the bubbly rocks. They did throw the tapes away. I wish they would have given them to me so I could listen to them and see what exactly was going on there. Could you imagine? That would be records from Ignacio, Colorado, people that were possessed or whatnot. Like, I would have loved to check that out, but yeah, that commensurates the Hat Man in my life. And I did see him one other time. I generally keep my door closed. We used to have a lock on there until my nephew took it off of our door and put it on his door, which is okay, you know. I guess you need to feel secure, so go ahead and take my lock. But yeah, that was kind of weird. But anyways, we had the door closed, and the hallway light was generally left on because people are afraid of the dark and what lurks in the dark. And so the hallway light was on, and we saw this figure. First, we heard it, and that's why me and my husband were looking. And then we saw it, this tall figure creeping around our doorway and knocking and punching the walls and all kinds of stuff. We've seen them in different ways. My kids have seen them. Not just my littles, but my older kids too. But yeah, that's pretty intriguing. This one is by user /space_toast_. Peekaboo, I see you. When my daughter was born, I would be the one to primarily put her to bed in her crib at night. I would rock her back and forth in an old chair in the corner of the room. One night, while I was rocking her to sleep, she perked up and started waving at the wall in the room. It was weird, but children do things, so I brushed it off. She would do weird things like this every other night. However, the creepiest moment was one night when she was sleeping in my bed with my wife and me, and me and my daughter, both woke up at the same time in the middle of the night. I saw that the door to our bedroom was wide open, and my daughter propped herself up, giggling, and covered her eyes, saying, "Peekaboo, I see you," into the darkness. This would be creepy enough on its own, but my daughter was really young and couldn't say very many phrases at the time, and this was the first time she ever said those words. Needless to say, it was an uneasy night. This one is by u/Mystic Moon 5551996. One day ago. The time I saw my dad talking to a ghost or entity, and this is under the category of encounter. This happened when I was about 15 in a little town called St. Helens just outside of Portland, Oregon. At the time, our family was really going through some tough obstacles. My dad had been acting very strange, talking to himself and not acting as he normally did for a couple of days. His personality would change quite often. At the time, he was not diagnosed with schizophrenia, and we were trying to get him some help. Leading up to the night I had seen this thing conversing with my dad, I'd also experienced very strange dreams, and it felt like I had been sat on by someone very heavy. I looked, and no one was there. My brother had seen something he called the garbage man on numerous occasions. He said it looked like a bag was over his head and was being sucked into his mouth and eye sockets. It leaned over to him and appeared to be very tall. This thing visited him a few times. It was about 2 a.m., and I heard my dad talking to someone or himself. At this point, I had a routine of going and talking with him, calm him. My bedroom had been right next to the kitchen and the bathroom because it was a small house. I walk into the kitchen, which had been lightly lit by the outside lights. First thing I see is this very tall shadow figure in the doorway of the bathroom, and my dad standing toe to toe with this massive thing. He was mumbling something, then he says loudly, "Leave me alone!" I'm terrified, so I ran back into my bedroom. My dad's mental state took a turn. It was a struggle for my family to get him help. Eventually, things escalated, and my dad was considered a danger to himself and others and was able to get the help he deserved. They did not find drugs in his system and eventually diagnosed him with schizophrenia. I don't know why we saw this thing or what it was. I think it was preying on my dad's weakness. Can people with this mental illness see past the curtains? Since this day, that question runs through my head a lot. Well, that makes me wonder, does he actually have schizophrenia? Did you actually leave him alone in his hour of need? Where you could have spoke up and said, "Hey, I saw it too," instead of your dad just sounding crazy, like batshit crazy? Seriously, what the fuck? Stand up for your family. Don't let people go through this. If you've experienced it and your dad or your mom or whoever is going through this, instead of being like, "Oh, well, you're schizophrenic because you're seeing and hearing things." No, I saw and heard it too. Mm, I don't know. That really just irritates me. Here's one that says, "Shadow people. Has anyone encountered a shadow person?" Has anyone encountered a shadow person? What are your thoughts on shadow people? Yes, I've seen several. This one is by you / Lizzie Lulu 0709. My most horrifying night in my home. In my late years of 12, I experienced something that scared me for life. I live in South Africa, so load shedding exists. If you don't know what that is, it is when the power goes out for 2 hours. It was like 21:15 p.m. in my house. My mom set up lights powered by a battery leading throughout our entire house. My mom left it on before she went to sleep and kept it on. In mind, I was the only one awake. I went to put the light off, still no power, only me and my flashlight. The battery was in front of the bathroom where the sink and mirror was. After I turned the lights off, I turned facing the mirror. Behind me was a person. I turned almost immediately and nobody was there. Once again, I was the only one awake at that time. I only saw it for less than a second, but it has scared me for life. It has also scarred me for life. There was someone who died in this hostel. I don't know if it was because I was tired or if it was the light, but I have ever since felt a strange energy at the bathroom. This is by you/princess_Rue_hurt. Encounter Haunted Dorm. In 2013, I was a freshman in college. There are always university stories with haunted dorms, rooms, or basements. So I never thought anything of it when I heard that our dorm, Rogers Hall, was very haunted. Within the first 3 weeks, 5 girls attempted to commit suicide by jumping off the building. Thankfully, they were unsuccessful, but it for sure rocked us and made us start to believe that there may be an angry presence hanging around. One early morning, my roommate and I were asleep, and we always left the TV on when we were in bunk beds. This is kind of important to the story because normally my roommate couldn't get out of bed without waking me up. When I woke up, I didn't have my glasses on, but I could see a girl standing in front of our TV. She had medium brown hair, was wearing a gray sweatshirt and some jeans, and she looked like she was chewing on her sleeve. I immediately thought it was my roommate and rolled over to turn on my desk lamp and grab my glasses to ask her why she was up so early. When I flipped on the light and grabbed my glasses, she was gone, and I thought maybe my roommate went to the bathroom, so I got out of bed and I looked up at her bed and she was still sleeping. I shook her awake and asked her how she got up so quickly, and she had no idea what I was talking about. The same day, maybe within a few hours, our friend that lived down the hall went to the communal bathroom and was washing her face. The door to the bathroom was very heavy and scraped the floor when you opened it. She said she heard someone open the bathroom door and she saw someone walk behind her. She didn't think anything of it because it was our floor's bathroom and girls were waking up to get ready for classes. On one side of the bathroom there were toilets. On the other side of the bathroom there were showers. But there were sinks and mirrors in the middle for both sides. Our friend was on the side of the showers. She said she saw the girl walk in the shower. As she was washing her face, she never heard the shower turn on, and she called over to her asking if everything was okay. She even walked over to see if the girl needed help, but there was no one there. Nothing ever happened again to either of us that year, but that still creeps me out. This is by you/Maggie Pie 184. Home, scary home. When my parents divorced, we moved to my grandmother's house. It was an old farmhouse, 2-story with 4 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs in the horseshoe shape with the stairs where the horseshoe is open. Going downstairs, the living room is on the right and the dining room on the left that leads into the kitchen. My grandmother's room was off the kitchen. Without a doubt, the landing at the top of the stairs, and the living room, dining room had a presence. It felt mean. It felt like someone bad was watching, waiting to harm you. It was common knowledge in the family that the house was haunted. When my aunt and uncle visited, he slept with a gun under his pillow. Not that it would help, but at least he felt comfortable. My great-grandmother was mean in life and apparently mean in death, since most people believe the spirit to be hers. My mom's brother died when he was 5, and at times you could hear him playing on the stairs, bumping down like kids do. I would race downstairs, through the dining room, and into the safety and lightness of the kitchen. I hated to be alone upstairs and slept with the hall light on until I moved when I was about 14. This one is by u/Dacy, DACCY. Smacky, SMACKY. My sister was too afraid to sleep one night. Encounter. When my sister was young, probably about 5 or 6, we had just moved into a new house as a family. My sister was always good about sleeping by herself at night, which was ironic given how I myself was not. But regardless, she gave our parents relatively little trouble sleeping by herself ever. Except one night, when she had a particularly rough night and went downstairs to ask my mom to come sleep with her, because as little kids tend to do, she got scared. Mom goes upstairs with her and lies down. My sister falls asleep, but my mom is struggling to fall asleep. That is until Dad gets in bed behind her, holding them both, helps Mom fall asleep. They all pass out together. Mom wakes up. Dad isn't in bed with them anymore. That's fairly typical. My dad gets up super early to go to work most mornings and lets my mom sleep in, so she thinks nothing of it until he gets home. She asked him when he came upstairs to sleep with them last night. As he was asleep with them, my sister first asked to come to bed with her. Dad replies that he never left their bed, slept by himself downstairs all night. Who got in bed with Mom? This one is by u/deadgirl77. There really was something behind me this time. This just happened early this morning. I have sleep issues, so I'm always up long before daylight. I'm also the only one in the house up this early besides a few of the dogs and cats. Around 4:30 this morning, I woke up and shuffled into the kitchen to make me coffee, as usual. I drank hot coffee, so I make mine in the blender. I have this thing that every time I start the blender, I feel like someone is behind me. I always look and no one's ever been there, but still. My kitchen is at the back of the big old house, so when I'm standing at the blender, the laundry room with have a bath is to my left. Directly behind me is the doorway into the dining room. My bedroom is on the right dining room wall, and in the back there's another door into the living room, which is locked at night, so I'm in the kitchen. One of my dogs, Teddy, and one of my cats, Phoenix, are sitting on the chair next to me. I'm doing my thing, and I started the blender. A couple seconds later, Teddy growls, looking into the dining room. Phoenix is looking the same direction, and immediately get this someone's behind me feeling. I turned the blender off and looked behind me, expecting nothing as usual, and see what looked like my husband going back into the bedroom. My bedroom doesn't have a door, so there's a curtain over it. I saw him go through the door, just a quick glimpse, really, and when he threw the curtain back, one of my own cats, Thomas, attacked it. I stopped the blender thinking, what the fuck is he doing up? So at first I thought he must have gone to the bathroom. He must have gone upstairs to the bathroom, but he'd had to unlock the door and walk upstairs, which he wouldn't do. And to get to the downstairs, he'd have to had literally squeezed past me through the door, and he hadn't. Neither of my kids had come in, and the house is silent. I walked into the bedroom pretty much right behind him. My husband is sound asleep, and so are the other dogs. No one there but me. But Teddy and Phoenix saw him, and I know I did. So who the fuck went into my bedroom, and where the fuck did they go? This one is by u/J Trizzo 99. Ghost named Ruth. From 2010 to 2011, my family lived briefly in early 1900s house in Ashland, Kentucky. The house was 3 floors, with the third floor being converted attic. My older sister's bedroom was essentially the whole third floor, while my younger brother and I shared a room on the second floor next to my parents. For my siblings and me, there was a definite culture shift in moving to Ashland from Nashville, Tennessee. We went from a more suburban area to a somewhat more remote area of northern Kentucky. We were further in Appalachia, and the people were definitely different. We noticed it first in the behaviors of our next door neighbors. The house on our left belonged to an old hoarder named Joanne. The woman was rarely seen, but monstrous when she would confront my family and me. She didn't drive, but there was an old gray sedan filled to the brim with newspapers and trash that sat in her driveway for as long as we lived there. Her backyard was littered with ancient-looking antiques, statues, and furniture. After once finding my brother, I snooped around her yard, laughing at all the junk she had collected. She made a statement along the lines of, "Ruth, you should straighten you out," and motioned back towards our house. We never thought much of it until our other next-door neighbor mentioned that a previous owner of our house was a longtime friend of hers named Ruth. Ruth had died in the house years before. Hearing that was more than enough to creep the hell out of my brother and me. Inside our house, it was my sister that first started having strange experiences. She was around 17 at the time, yet, almost like a young child, she could hardly stay in the house by herself. She said that her bedroom scared her, and she felt like something was in her closet. The third floor had 3 closets, and the biggest one had 2 sliding doors. My sister mentioned that many times she would think the door was closed, look away, and then find it open without any explanation. At night time, there were a few things when she came downstairs, knocking on my parents' door, asking for them to keep it down, only to notice that the noise wasn't coming from anyone in the house. It was muffled speaking, and only my sister could hear it in her room. After a few months, my sister became so uncomfortable on the third floor that she moved into our second floor guest room. My brother and I quickly begged to take the third floor room because it meant more space. We didn't really know at the time how scared my sister was on the third floor. Right away, I was definitely able to feel a sensation in the room. I would often feel like I was buzzing on high alert for no reason. One way to describe the feeling would be that it was similar to how I feel or you'd feel moments after someone almost hit you with their car. Even after the moment is over and you can feel your heart race, your mind buzz, and your senses heighten. Almost daily, I would feel the sensation or the tension in the room and start to get this overwhelming feeling. The sliding door closet was, for whatever reason, the center of a lot of incidents I witnessed. Multiple times I watched the door slide open with no one pulling or pushing it. The door was level, and we tested the AC to see if an air vent was causing the sliding door to blow open, and we couldn't find a connection. One night, my brother had his friend over, and they were playing with Legos in the room in front of the closet. I watched as the shut door slammed open just behind them. The three of us sprinted downstairs screaming, and though my mom was able to console us, she's told me years later now that she was terrified. She fully started believing that something was in the house when she had closet slam open in front of her. She then felt a cold rush around her shoulders and back and panicked and left the house. About a month after that, she moved my brother and I back into our second floor bedroom. We only use the third floor as a guest room. Though it's been over 10 years, I still remember being petrified of being in that room alone, even during the day. It was a very stressful point in my childhood, and I feel like I still attach a lot of negativity and bad memories to that time. I never had other paranormal experiences outside of that, but my experiences in Ashland were so strong that it is tough for me to be a skeptic. Something is truly in that house, and it could very well be a ghost named Ruth. On that note, boys and girls, that is the end of our time. Thank you so much once again for joining me on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm so glad you were able to hang out with us during this time as we read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We've also been reading from Reddit Ghost Stories. It's been a very, very nice evening. I haven't gotten cold at all, and I'm thinking maybe, just maybe, I just might wear these pajamas anytime, all the time, in order to just stay this warm. It's been super epic. I've been really, really loving it. But I want to thank you guys so much once again for being my guests on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It's been a pleasure having you, and thank you to all of our friends on We Are Paradox Media's KPNL Radio, Facebook, Twitter, iHeartRadio, and wherever else beyond the Omniverse you may be listening tonight. I had a wonderful time this evening, and I can't wait to do it again next weekend when we have Michael on here from Midnight Paranormal Society, and then we have story time with me, TessaTNT, once more on Sunday. You guys don't forget to set your clocks back. It's time to fall back. When spring comes, you can spring forward, but enjoy the extra hour of sleep. Don't forget, we are all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better. And together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. If you'd like to join us on the Skype after party, just look me up at tessa.n.thomas30@gmail.com or give us a little jingle jangle at 970-335-9596. Until next time, nighty night, love and light to all my space creatures and mutants out there. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend and week, and I will see you back here, same crazy time, same batty place. Take care of my ears.